Welcome to GloverChat episode 3, The Power of Gratitude. I want to chat with you today about something that Emily and I recently did where we sat down and put some intentional time into being grateful to God for all of the amazing things that have happened this year. What we did was we just set aside a time, a date night. Actually, we planned for it. We went and dropped off the kids at my mom and dad's house. We went and picked up some Whataburger for food, came back to the house, and had a time where we sat down and worshiped and talked and reflected on all of the great things that God had done this year. Um, Honestly, this was the first time we had ever done anything like this together. I have been journaling through the years and reflecting at the end of the year. Emily kind of does her own things. But this year, we wanted to do something together specifically. And we centered it around this idea. I don't know where Emily got it from, but she took a jar and she started collecting all the great things that were going on, things that God was doing in our life, or blessings, or little wins, or victories. We had this jar up on our mantle in the living room, and when something would happen, we would write down on a slip of paper just kind of a real quick whatever it was. I like to put dates on them so I can remember, oh, this is when that happened. And we would put them in this jar. And at the end of the year, we gathered all of them up and sat down and went through them one by one. And let me tell you, this was one of the most incredible things that I have ever done. I told her, like, that was my favorite date of this year, was to sit down with her and do that. So I'm just going to kind of share what we did, what it looked like, and then encourage you to do something similar. Doesn't have to be this way. And it doesn't, I know we're right here at New Year's, but it doesn't have to be on New Year's Eve or at the beginning of the year. It doesn't have to be a New Year's resolution. You can do something like this anytime. It's not about the date on the calendar, it's more about the position of your heart, and intentionally thanking God for the things that He's done and recognizing Him, seeing Him. And so, really, that's what all this is about. And so we got a jar. Basically, Emily, I'll bet she saw it on TikTok or something. She got a jar and she said, "We're going to start keeping, the good things that happen, the blessings, the wins, things like that." And she called it a Glimmer jar. And that sounded a little too effeminate for me, so I called it a gratitude jar. But in our Glimmer jar, I think she saw it as like little glimmers of hope or little glimmers of like God in our lives. And so I'm okay with the name. I just kind of joke about that. Um, but when we would write these things down, some of them were, I mean, so small, like to other people. To us, they were a big deal. But to normal, to other people, it might not have been a big deal. I'm not going to go into the details about what they are, but they might have been they were a big deal to us, but they might have been small to someone else. It didn't have to be the biggest thing in the world. We literally just, if we felt like putting it in the jar, we would put it in the jar. I was surprised by some of the things she put in, and I'll bet she was surprised by some of the things I put in. And then other things were huge. And I mean like massively huge. Some of the things were lifelong dreams coming true. And I mean that, I mean, especially for her. Like, I'll just even share this one with you. I know she wouldn't care. But for her, she has been a singer and a worship leader her entire life. She has sung at church since she was a kid. She's led worship and done events and all these different things. She's been in bands with me. She's done a lot of different projects, but she had never in her life done um, her a recording as a solo artist professionally. Now, she had done recordings like with friends or people she knew, but never professionally as a solo artist. And this year, because of all the gigs and the events and things that she was doing, we had saved up enough money to go and pay for some professional studio time for her to record 3 original songs. And so, number one, that's just so huge for her to be able to do that, a lifelong dream realized. And it's something that we saw God in every step of the way. If you know any of the story about her kind of venturing out on her own and stepping into the world of gigging and doing things like that, she's always been inside the church. And now she's taking that gift that God has given her and her message and pointing people to Jesus, she's taken it outside of the four walls of the church. She's going into the world and sharing the hope and the love of Christ in this way. And it's been really cool to see how God has worked in our lives through that, and worked in her life especially. And so her gigging and saving up the money that she would make, we'd always come home and we'd keep track of how much money she made, like in tips or in payment. And we made enough to go and get professional studio time, which was just phenomenal because we love the guys that work there. It's a joy to work with them. We'd worked with them in a previous project, but I mean, she's 40 years old and got to record her first solo, project in a professional studio. And so that was huge. So some things were small, some things were just massive. And some of those things were for me too. I did some things that I say I, let me rephrase that. God did some things through me that I would not have even imagined that were possible, but were literally just the result of me, I feel, walking in obedience whenever he would call me to do something that I wasn't unsure of, or I didn't know how it would work, or I didn't even really know how to do it. I'm going to talk about probably in the next episode about doing things that you really don't know how to do and figuring out as you go, because that kind of seems to be my life story. Anyways, back to this. But some of the things that God did were just so huge in my life. Some victories that I was just like, wow. And I'll say this, we all know life gets so busy. It's really easy to forget good things that happened a week ago, a month ago, 2 months ago, let alone at the beginning of the year or a year ago. So writing them down was a way to kind of memorialize them for us, which was so good. But here's kind of the way we set up the evening. So talked about what the jar is, what it's contained, but here's the way we set it up. This is not a prescription. It's just, here's what we did. Dropped the kids off, went and got our Whataburger. We used the Whataburger app to pre-order our food so that we could go get it real quick, come back. And so we just spent time, first of all, just worshiping together. Just me and her, low key. She played ukulele, I played guitar, and just kind of worshiping, singing to God. Just me and her together, which, number one, that's one of my favorite things in the world, is just to do that. I find that to be such a deeply intimate thing, to worship with your spouse. And we have the joy of doing that through music, but that's not the only way to worship with your spouse at all. But we do it through music. Then after we sang the worship songs, we spent some time in prayer, just thanking God and just acknowledging him in our lives, just, recognizing who he is and what he's done. And then we went through the jar. We pulled everything out one by one. She would go through a thing. I would go through a thing. They were all kind of folded up, so we didn't know who was getting what. And just as we pulled them out of the jar, we would just reflect on them for a moment. Like, oh, do you remember that? That was so cool when this happened, or when that happened, or when this, came about, or when you found out that, or when it was just so cool to sit there and reflect together. And it's also, I think the other part that I really liked about it is it's a way to be intentional in your encouragement of one another and cheer for one another's victories and wins and support each other, because that's something that's very important to me, is to be very specific in, like, supporting Emily's goals and dreams, and I want to feel supported in that too. So to me, this whole thing was just amazing. But we went through all that. We prayed over everything, just thanking God and acknowledging him, and just remembering him as the source for every good thing in our lives, but also recognizing the that all of this is a gift. It's all a blessing. None of this is a requirement. It's not a reward because we did something right. It's just because God is good to us. He's a good God, and we thank him, and we want to see him in all of those things. And really, it was not about getting our way with God. Like, oh, look at us, we're being grateful, so you'll give us more. It's not about manipulating God. It is really about recognizing Him. When we look, you go back in Scripture and you look at like the Jews, and throughout their history, they're constantly recalling all the things God had done through Abraham, through Moses. Like they're going back and retelling the stories of their people. They're saying, "Look what God has done for our family." Essentially, I mean, they're Jews. They're all related to Abraham. Look what God did for us. Remember what God can do. He's a good God. He's a powerful God. Look what God did. And I want to do that in my own family. I want to be very intentional about doing that in my family as well, because God is not just the God of the past. He is the God of the past. He did all of those things for the Jewish people. He's performed so many miracles. He's done amazing things. But if we think that God is done doing miracles, working in our lives, blessing, I mean, we would miss out on so much. God is alive and He's active in our lives. He's doing things today. He's doing things right now. He is working and He is moving things and He is preparing miracles and blessings and He is preparing hearts to come to know Him. He is at work just as much right now as He was back then. And I think that that's very important for us as people to remember. It's not just history, it's now. It's not just for them, this is for us as well. And so that's something I want to specifically start doing more of and more of in my life. And I felt like this was such a great way to do that, to recognize that, to memorialize that. Um, and so, yeah, it really was. It was us seeing Him, seeing Him in the little things, seeing Him in the big things, but also, like I said, with some of the big things, like Emily, some of the stuff that happened was a lifelong dream in the making. But what it did was it also helped us see kind of the things along the path along the way. There's been things that have happened where we've seen, like, God, why didn't this work? Or why didn't this happen? Or why didn't this? Or why didn't that? But then if you keep track of things, you can look back and see why God said no, or not yet, or just wait, or I'm preparing this, I'm preparing you. And so you can see that when you memorialize it in certain ways, especially when you write them down. Like I said, I journal, but doing this on top of that, just, I love it. Um, Seeing Him, so we're recognizing what He's doing, but then thanking Him. It's not just a recognition of, okay, I see God, but it's personal. It's, thank you, God. You didn't have to do this, but you did. You did, because you're a good God and you love us and you're a good father and you give good things to your children. And we're going to see the good in everything that we can. We're going to find as much good as we can. And we're going to focus on those things and see you in them and thank you for them. And I think that's a very important part of our faith walk as Christians. Um, it's it's also, again, I kind of talked about this earlier. It's also uniting as a couple, uniting us in our faith, building one another up. I think that is massively important. I mean, life is tough. Life is busy when you got kids and family and jobs and hobbies and all the things. Making sure that you as a couple are united in your faith, that you are moving together in this thing is is very important. And it's easy, just like with anything else, to get into just the I don't know, the humdrum day to day. It's not that important, and you just kind of go about your way, kind of thing. And so this is a great way to be intentional about our faith, not just as individuals, but as a couple who have this family, who are raising these children, who are trying to do things for ourselves, but also trying to do things for our family and our legacy and our future and their future and future generations. And so I think this is massively important for that as well. So all that to say, this was absolutely amazing. I won't lie. There were moments of it that for me were a little awkward. Anytime you do something for the first time like this, it could be a little awkward, if you're not used to it. And that's okay. It's okay to be a little awkward. I promise you, guys, your wife would just be thrilled to do something like this. So you don't have to be perfect at it. She'll just be happy that you want to go through these kind of things with her, that you'll want to be intentional with her and with your faith and remembering what God's doing in your life. And so she'll absolutely love that. And then women, it's not just it's not just the men who have to lead this thing. You play a great part in this too. You both are doing this together. It's not him or her, it's you guys together. You both are bringing all of this to the table, and he might do this part, you might do that part, but you're doing it together. And so again, it doesn't matter if it feels awkward, if it's your first time to do something like this, it's totally cool. Um, but another thing is it's part of being intentional in your faith walk. And that is something for me that has been just huge. I go back to um, when I reflect on my faith over the years, because I have been saved since I was very young, but I have not always been intentional about certain aspects of my faith. And I want to be intentional. I want to recognize God in the everyday. I want to see him more in the little things. I want to know him more in every single thing that happens. I want to know him more in everything I'm doing. And I think a huge part of our growth and maturity as believers is our intentionality. I don't think it's legalistic, like, oh, you have to do this thing every day. I think it's more about just wanting to grow and to learn and to see, and God brings all that growth and maturity. But for me, that's been a huge thing, is being intentional about how I'm um, about my walk and my faith with God, about my gratitude for the things He's doing, about my belief in what He's able to do in my life, about my belief in why I'm here, why my wife is here, why my family is here, why you are here. I think it's just a huge part of that. Another thing is that us setting this time aside. It was only 2 hours, really. We dropped the kids off 2 hours, and then I went and picked them back up. But in that way, setting that time apart, it makes it sacred for me. And I don't mean sacred in the sense of like, um, a national holiday kind of thing, but it was sacred because it was set apart for us. We'd carved out this time. We'd done these little things all year long. And then we said, God, we're going to sit down and spend this time together. And it's just about seeing you and thanking you and believing in you, because that's some of the biggest. I'm trying to think of a way to say that is, no one can take away what you see God doing in your life. No one can argue that. It's not a theological point of discussion or debate. When you see God work miracles, no one can argue that in your life. When you see God do something, when you see God at work, that stirs up your faith in ways that are just beyond words. And so I think that's a huge part of this too, is being stirred in your faith, doing things that are not just activities you go through because it's the way it's done, or it's just finding ways to stir your faith. And this really stirred up mine. It was, I mean, just incredible. It was sacred. It was holy. It was set apart just for him, and caused me to believe even more. I see the things he's doing, and I know he can do far greater, abundantly beyond what I could see or comprehend or even ask for. And that was another piece, was that we also spent a little bit of time dreaming. Just if we could ask God for anything, we see him doing these things. If we were able to ask God for anything, and he was to say yes to us, what would it be? And it's not about manipulating God, but it's really just believing that he can do anything he wants at any time. He can show up in your life and do anything. And I love that part. That was another thing of for me that was just great. I just like anybody can get so negative in life going through life. So focusing on the good things and believing that God can do things is really important to me. So I would recommend that you do something similar. It doesn't have to be this. I'm just sharing this with you because this is what we did. And it really wasn't even my idea at the beginning. It was Emily's idea for the jar. And then it was my idea that we kind of sit down and do it in this way. And so we brought that together. But I recommend doing something like this with your spouse if they're willing to. Or even your family. I think one thing I want to do maybe later is bring the kids into this. Let them see these things. But I do think it's important for you and your spouse to spend some time just together and then bring the kids in at another time or later. I don't know. Do it however you want. Um, but yeah, I recommend you do this because you have so much to be thankful for. I realize looking back, I'd already forgotten things. It keeps track of your blessings. You're seeing God at work in your life. You're being intentional. You're setting things aside for Him. You're making holy moments for God. And so I could not recommend this anymore to anyone. Spending time in gratitude to God is just so, so powerful. So you should do something like that. Whatever that looks like for you, doesn't matter. There's not a right or wrong way. I can just promise you, you will be glad you spent time with God, thanking Him for everything He has done in your life in the past year. Well, this has been fun. I appreciate you talking to me about this or listening. Let's chat again soon.